Well, hello and welcome to Work Cookie, our weekly gathering of IOs, OCs, recruiters, HR professionals, and an actor or two as we try to make the world of work just a little bit better. And today, Jeremy, we're going to continue our open discussion, but we're going to take a look at bridging the IO psychology scholar practitioner divide. I remember we were having a discussion a couple of years ago with an IO psychologist who was doing research, and I think she mentioned that it's like 18 years before sort of a new research topic is sort of discovered, but to actually get it into, first of all, the textbooks and then into actual practical application, it can take like 18 years.
Yeah, that was Dr. Patty Delgado, and that's a long time when you're getting into the decades aspect of it. I was thinking, I was looking through because we're doing promotion for our IO Career Accelerator course for this month for August is IO Psychology Awareness Month. So happy that month. And there's a section on breaking imposter syndrome, and I was looking at that and I was thinking, what might this stem from a little bit? And when we look at the majority of the academic programs out there, your master's degree, PhDs, even your bachelor's degree, there are very few, if any, that prepare people for the real world, for practice, for working within organizations. The prep is more for here's how you do the research, here's how you become a scholar and continue to do research. And so what that does is if somebody hasn't had that relevant experience in the workplace, sure, they've done their studies, they know, but how do you bring that to an organization, especially someone, fresh out of grad school, ready to make change, and all of a sudden we've heard it a million times. I think it was Collins and Porras, maybe the every day the spirits of millions of people die at the front doorstep of their organization. So it's just this gap of how do I either bring this to the workplace or talk about it relevantly. Uh, and then I got back and I saw this. I have this Google alert for IO psychology, and it popped up and this article, and I'll share, or if somebody can reshare in the chat the references for today. But it all started off in psychologytoday.com publication. There was this article about how scholars and practitioners can collaborate. So just a couple thought pieces. I was thinking about what about other. So actually, I was looking up research. Let me go. I'm going to zigzag as always, Tom. I was looking up the research on this, and in a lot of the management journals, like the business journals, they're having the same type of problem where you have all these studies with management concepts, etc. But what about the practice part of it? So then I got to think, I wonder if this is prevalent in other sciences, like, I don't know, archaeology or medicine. I wonder how big the gap is there. Uh, I'm not in those fields, so I don't know. But again, it's just a thought point. But what I found was this has been, at least in the literature, since the 1960s, with the Carnegie Foundation and the Ford Foundation saying that they were saying we need to get more academic and more research based for our practices. There's a lot of weird paradoxes going on because the debate is happening in so there's scholarly articles, like thousands of them, where they talk about this. So that's where the debate is happening. So who's writing these articles? It's the academics. So it's weird when you look at how this is all going. But I'm going to share a couple things from the just some of these random notes that I have. So in that article, in that Psychology Today article, they were looking at two recent papers that were published on how to really bridge this divide. And one thing was changing the mindset, about scholars changing their mindset to have more concern with the applications of their research, of course, and practitioners recognizing the value in the basic research findings and how they're linked to evidence-based proven interventions. All right, perfect, great. I know we've talked about this before, like how many people who are, through their programs and are working in the field are actually saying, okay, I have a tough thing in an organization. I have to think about some interventions and are going to the research. A lot of people still do. A lot of people, don't anymore, but it is really effective. I mean, I think it was just the other week I was talking to someone, we were talking about, employee retention. And I was able to discuss the three types of commitment that there are based on all the research. And knowing that affective, meaning emotional commitment, is the most one that keeps people retained at companies. So now we can have really.
Hello, Jeremy.
He's
Well, I'm
having an
sure.
Elsa moment. He's
There we go.
frozen.
Oh, thank you very
He's
much for
having an
that.
Elsa. He's having an Elsa moment. He's frozen.
So I'm wondering, I'm sure Jeremy will be back with us. Has anybody else had this experience where the research is out there, but it's just not in the practical field yet? Or especially in your niches, is there research going on that you would love to access, but it's not really there? I see Linda Ann's hand up. Let's go to her.
So for me, whenever I'm working on something, especially that I need to take into a client, I do the homework on making sure that whatever I plan to do has some basis in fact or research or whatever, right? There's something to back it up. I think for me, the challenge is I can understand the research. However, that doesn't mean the people that I'm working with are there, right? So you have to start where people are and how much can they absorb and do they even understand the terminology? That's often when I'm working with people who want to start their own consulting business and they start giving me information and I'm like, well, I understand what you want to accomplish. You have to translate that into the right terminology before they can even understand what you're trying to achieve. And the same goes for down the line in employees. If they don't have an immediate kind of need and understanding how that can fix their need, it just goes over their head. That's my experience.
Kind of back to the what's in it for me, especially with the
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah.
Have you found any ways to bridge that gap? Like, how do you handle that when you know how you want to move an organization or group, but they're kind of staring at you like, bunny in the headlights?
What has worked for me, especially, and this is even in marketing, right? You need to educate the clientele, whoever your audience is, with information about what their need is that they don't even know they have. What's their problem? You identify that problem through education first, and then you offer the solution. Right? But if you start offering solutions without having them understand what the challenge is for them, then the solution is just like, okay.
Well, Jeremy, I see you're back. So let's go back to you. And Linda Ann raises a really good point about trying to get clients to actually understand where they may be speaking a different language.
Yes. So tell me more. What do you mean? Maybe speaking a different language? You mean because of just the academic nature of things?
Linda Ann, I'll go to you.
So what I said was my challenge is, often when I'm going into a client that I understand the theory and I've done the research and all those kinds of things, that doesn't mean they're ready to hear it. So you have to you have to understand where your client is first and go through the education process to help them understand what their problem is before you can offer them the solution.
Yeah. So I'm probably not going to hit because my internet timed out. I'm probably not going to be exactly on here. But where my mind goes is the time that it takes for research versus looking at and working in an organization, which is another reason why there's a gap. I mean, and also look at the funding with the research. It does take so much. There's so much money and time and resources that go into research, and that might be people in organizations know that. Especially people that are higher up, they have an education, they understand this about research, and they might think that they're going to be biting off more than they can chew if they go a certain route. So it's up to us as practitioners to make sure that we break things down into manageable chunks so they can see what a particular intervention is going to look like, so that it's not like just this huge overblown thing. Oh my gosh, we've all seen these studies out there, and we know people that are working in academia where they get these grants for so much money, and they've got like 4 years to to finish a study. If you're a practitioner, you don't have that kind of time, and you certainly don't have that kind of money allotted. So we go about it a different way. I do want to go about something else when you mentioned about just the language involved. I found it funny in this one article that's talking about the divide and how academics and practitioners need to speak each other's language. And here was the following sentence, which is hard enough to understand. On the other hand, there are several illustrations of successful communication between practitioners and academics. For example, scholars operating out of an interpretivist framework often emphasize the benefits of practitioner interpretation and meaning making regarding scholarly findings. I don't know of anyone that's that just the wording of it and being able to, like, the corporate speak. There is a difference in mindset. There's a difference in purpose. There's a difference in end goal. So there's definitely a lot of things that continue to keep that divide going. And the question is, how do we collaborate to make it more effective? Because there are instances.
Thank you very much for that. Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, it's kind of the big centerpiece issue of, how do we get the knowledge into the hands of people? I mean, we have the internet and the wealth of information that's out there. You have your local library, like the information's not necessarily hiding, but for somebody who's trying to solve a business case, they may or may not want to go and find all of that. I know for me, I get locked into kind of my own bias with IO psychology. This is great. It's psychology in the workplace, and we're doing good things for good people, but we're not the only field that thinks that they have the answers. You've got business schools, you've got, regular practitioners, you've got people who are backing into good solutions just because of luck. I think so. There's all this confluence that's out there in the marketplace, and you have to kind of decipher some of that as well. And I think part of what makes IO and HR practices is there's so much that becomes proprietary because there is competition out there. And so if they find something that works, they don't necessarily want to share it. And so that makes the gap, a little bit wider. And then the need for good research to be clear and, well thought out and controlling for this just little variable. We're going to deal with, if you apply on a Tuesday at 5 o'clock, what does that look like versus, that experimental design. Okay, we did that experiment. Now we're going to go do the next step based on what we found. And so those iterations are not necessarily quick, but they are also trying to be very, very sterile. And that's why we always get back to that answer of it depends. The experiment itself is a created, manufactured situation. And how do you translate that and what it means to, the untamed, uncontrolled, as much as we try to, business case use and everything like that.
So, Jeremy, that brings up a couple of good points of, there's the gap between the researchers and the practitioners, but is it really and truly a gap, or is it a system that's broken down and that information is just not flowing?
So I think you said it perfectly. The information is just not flowing. And part of that is, like, how is the information in these research studies really being disseminated? And I was thinking about this. What would happen, and I'm sure that there are thousands of people that would hate me for saying this. What would happen if we just made it by default? We added a section. So you've got your regular peer-reviewed article in IO psychology. You've got your literature review, your methods section, your discussion, yada, yada. What would happen if we put in there, just by default from now on, a section that was, all right, see it in practice. Here is either a case study, or here's how it might work and look in practice. So there's an idea. Number two, what would happen? Again, you've got to get the information out there, but it's with that collaboration with practitioners. But what if the research could be, again, more purposefully disseminated with a call, some kind of a call to action for practitioners who are facing this type of problem and creating an intervention to use their research, create an intervention that's specifically based on their research, if applicable, and then actually report back to say, here's how we used your very particular research in practice, and then have something bounce off of that or whatever it may be. So I think there's a way to do it, but again, it's I guess that's why we're here today.
Well, so I can sort of draw a parallel to a book where there's somebody who writes the book and there's somebody who wants to read books, but it's that editing and marketing and getting the word out. And it seems that there is a gap there where there are IO psychologists who are creating all this great research, IO psychologists who want to implement all this great research, but there's no middleman. There's no person in between who's actually taking all of that research and knowledge, coming up with those interventions and solutions, practical applications, and then putting it out to the larger community.
Does anyone know of a publication out there that is doing something more like this? Because maybe we just don't know. Maybe there's something more recent. I don't know. If you do, let us know. Tom, back to you.
Well, I'm hearing crickets on that one, so maybe that's a good role for Seabach, is to go
Get our
from
hands on something else.
Mhm. Let's get even more busy. Well, thank you for that. Lee, let's go to you.
What that reminds me of is, you've seen, speaking of books, you see a book where someone writes a book about a book.
Yeah.
And that's what it reminds me of, a treatise on or whatever. And that actually makes a lot of sense, because even if you do the research and you find the perfect study and you put it into practice and it works or it doesn't, we don't ever do that. We don't go back and write a postmortem, or at least if we do, we don't send it back. We don't publish it. We don't do these things. Because what do practitioners not do? We don't publish. We're not in the academic journals. We're not doing but case in point to some of the stuff, at SciOp last year, I went to a couple of the sessions that were billed as applied practitioner-based type things, and sitting in there and listening and doing a little head scratching, because I'm like, the math ain't mathing. What's going on here? And I'm looking at other people, and they're kind of doing the same thing. And then you get in and you look, and the presenters are all academics, and absolutely no heartburn with academics. But when you have an academic that's their thing, that's what they're doing, they're not necessarily qualified to talk on the application. By the same thing that I got out of grad school almost 30 years ago. I am not an academic, and I am not qualified to speak as an academic at this point. And I don't pretend to be one. I didn't stay at the Holiday Inn Express last night. I can't do that. So, I think that there's a gap. And I think that one thing we could do potentially is reach out to these grad schools and say, hey, look, I got some real world stuff. How about we partner on some research, and we get to apply, we get the practitioners back involved in some research, and we pull the academics kicking and screaming closer to the practitioner side. And then we can work on the translation of the words. And another problem with academic research is, by the time it comes out, they're answering yesterday's question. I'm worried about today and tomorrow's question. And by the time the question is asked, it's already too late. You need to be looking forward and going, what is the next question? And if we really, really, really get the research down right, we're forecasting. Okay, I'm looking at the current thing. What do I think the next thing's going to be? And let's research that. And that's where you really want to be. Now, what's the solution for that? I mean, I wish I was a prognosticator and could tell you, but that's the money right there, is to be able to do the next thing. In fact, what do we see in business? The really, really successful businesses are doing the next thing. You know, if you can do yesterday's thing, great, fantastic, good for you. But the guy who's beating you is the guy who's doing tomorrow's thing today. And that's our challenge. And I mean, you know, we've got this wonderful think tank full of people. Maybe we can come up with some of these things. But you know, it is interesting, as in being my thing, is that I hear you guys and some of the academics, whatever, talk about, hey, this research says this thing. And I'm going, you know, I can verify that because I've seen that in action. I'm so happy to know that what I did is backed up in research, you know, and just using our experience and our knowledge, you know, a lot of times we are doing things, putting things into practice that we don't actually realize that it's backed up in research. Sweet, somebody studied it and they validated what I already experienced. So, you know, it's just been kind of a cool thing for me being part of this group, because, you know, it's like, yeah, I've seen that. So yeah, that's kind of thing. Another problem with a lot of academic research is a lot of the research is behind a paywall. And so if you are not, if you're not in a school with access to their library, or if you are not a member of a particular organization, you can't get the stuff. And for a lot of practitioners, it's not worth the money. I got one thing I don't want to look at. I'm not going to pay for a subscription to whatever it is, because I'm not going to use it enough to be worth that, you know. And that's kind of an issue too. So, you know, maybe that's a collaboration thing. You know, people got to make money. They got to pay for that research. I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, let me ask you, Jeremy, because, you know, CBOC does have some connections with IO psychology departments in universities. Would there be any interest in working with them? Would they be interested in working with us to bridge that gap?
Universities have a lot of red tape. I think there's a period at the end of that sentence.
I believe it. When I created a new program, it was a 4 to 5 year effort, just because of all the approvals, all the red tape.
Yeah, they're very guarded. Lots of red tape. Not that that's a bad thing, universities out there. We love you very much. Hugs and kisses. But there's a lot of red tape. And this is what they will tell you as well.
Oh, wow. I hate it when there's a great solution and it's like, yeah, we can't actually do that, but maybe we'll keep trying. Thank you for that, though. Jason, let's go to you.
Yes, my recent experience I've been finding is where we're publishing articles for IO psych, forensics, whatever it may be, is scattered all over the place, and it's not in a centralized location. So it's very difficult to find some topics that are very relevant to what it is that we're dealing with on a practical side. I mean, as internal consultants or external consultants, whatever, we tend to get so busy that we can't do our own research unless, you know, we're in academia where we have that opportunity. It just makes it really, really difficult. But that's just kind of my experience. Plus, it seems we're still really, really focused, and I know this is a sensitive area, but on quantitative research instead of mixed methods or applying qualitative research. And to me, I think that qualitative side of the research will bridge that gap between the academic language and the adding the human language back to things where, you know, the business owners, even small business owners, can kind of understand what's being communicated, you know. So
Let me come back to you on that one too, Jeremy, because I'm starting to get the sense that there are IO psychologists who do research, there are IO psychologists who do practical application, and you're both really truly speaking different languages and you don't communicate to each other.
So I think a good way to show that in action is at the end of this. Let me see, call the name of this article out. So this is the this is the title. Academics and practitioners are alike and unalike. The paradoxes of academic practitioner relationships. I need a nap after saying that. So the two authors at the end have there's this concluding reflection that's written, and I think this sums it up. We, the authors, are very good friends. We've collaborated on research projects multiple times over the past 15 years. We expected that collaborating on this essay about scholars and practitioners collaborating together would go as smoothly as our other projects have gone. But somehow this particular collaboration was different. We discovered we had very different ideas of what the essay should be about. As a result, we've gone through various wildly varying drafts, frequent disagreements about emphasis. These disagreements produced several impasses, delayed the final product, and at one point even threatened to unravel our friendship. In the end, it was mostly our desire to preserve the friendship and learn from tensions that we were experiencing that kept us struggling with the article. We reminded ourselves that we're sitting on the same side of the table as we critiqued each other's drafts. This deep interpersonal experience heightened our awareness of basically how deep the tensions are within this academic practitioner divide and made us painfully aware that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you got two people, practitioner, scholar, collaborating on one thing to bridge the gap between scholar and practitioner, and they almost lost their friendship over it, which is kudos to them for bringing that out and sharing that final reflection at the end. It's definitely something to think about. And you're on mute.
So as an artist, I'm going to step in and go, isn't that just a situation of two authors writing for different audiences? That the academic was writing for an academic audience and the practitioner was writing for a practitioner audience.
Bada bing, bada boom. There it is.
All right. Thank you for that. I now feel smart. Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, I think that's wild that, somebody being on the same side would almost, sever a 15-year friendship based on not understanding the other one's aim. And I think a lot of times this gap gets brought up in a very confrontational way. Tastes great, less filling sort of argument. Both things can be true at the same time. And I think that's why you hear this, scientist practitioner model so often in so many IO programs. You're supposed to be able to speak both languages. You're supposed to be able to jump back and forth. That takes a lot of energy. That takes a lot of reframe to play in both arenas. But my experience with people who have found this field is they do like wearing multiple hats. They like to be the liaison. They like to be the translator. And I think that there's a ton of value in that. And I think there's so many people who are so frustrated that there's a lot of great ideas out there and nobody's listening, nobody's hearing them, nobody's seeing them. But I would take a moment and defend the gap a little bit because we talk about, where does the funding come from for research? And I think to some degree, if we leave purely theoretical research in the hands of universities that are doing their thing with public money and that all goes that way, there is some just true and pure research that is observational and not influenced by what's happening in the moment, what administration is there, what's the new trend. There's a certain level of, if you've got an institution that's been around for 150 plus years and they have decided this is a concept that we need to study, we have the endowment to do it and we're going to do it and nobody can stop us. I think that's a fantastic thing. And yes, those discoveries are typically slower to get into the main field, but they're not influenced by as much. I don't think you could take influence out of it entirely. But I would say that, much like a separation of church and state, that gap does have a little bit of a safety mechanism to keep both sides safe and operating, but you do still need to talk across that divide and make it as small as necessary.
Thank you very much for that. Lee, let's go to you.
One of the challenges with funding research is the funders of the research want to fund the research they want. And so that's a challenge that I may want to research this thing, but nobody wants to pay for that thing. And so that's a challenge. That's challenge one when you're talking, even in academics, a lot of times when they're getting those grants, it's for something that the grantor wants studied. And it may have application to absolutely no one but them. And sometimes not even them. But so that's a challenge. But I wanted to go back to something that Linda Ann said earlier, that when you're bringing research to, the marketplace, she said something very, very important about, as usual, about meeting the people where they are because they may not be ready. And then the second part of that is the translation. Because first you have to gauge, you're not going to talk theoretical physics to a fifth grader. Most fifth graders. I'm sure there's some that are smarter than me. But so you have to figure out the level of the person that you're speaking with. Where are they on the topic that we're discussing? And then you have to speak to that level. And you have to be able to translate what you're saying into regular person speak that they will understand. And which is also goes with the academic practitioner, is using the words. Okay. And this is where the whole open-mindedness comes into, right? So like, on the pop-ups, we get a lot of academic people, a lot of people in school, a lot of professors, and then, and they say something, and I'm like, okay, I don't know that means the same thing to me. And and I can say something and they go, well, are you meaning this? Or are you meaning this? Because there are multiple meanings to words. There's impressions, there's experiences, there's, that's part of the diversity, right? We all have different experiences. We have backgrounds and education and all the things. So that's where you have to have that open-mindedness to go, okay, when I hear that, I'm hearing this thing. Is that what you mean? And, because that's the problem with communication in general, right? Send and receive a message, truth's in the middle somewhere. And really, and you could broaden that across, dealing with other cultures and whatever else, it's the same thing. Heck, when I get involved with my wife, I'm from Louisiana, she's from Oregon. We have words that don't mean the same thing. And part of the challenge was figuring out the translation on some of those words. And things that actually mean something to someone in a particular context. And I can remember early on me actually saying, look, if there's two ways to take that something, I meant the way that doesn't make you mad. And that's that, that is an example of the type of thing, Jeremy's example of the two guys darn near losing their friendship. When you have to take that step back and go, Tim, you just said this thing. I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're meaning. Can you rephrase that for me? Which goes back to active listening, right? All the things we learn in psychology. And sometimes we forget these concepts. And I know I have. I know I've been like, I get all, oh, that wasn't what you meant. My bad. So we have to have the intellectual honesty with ourselves to go, I may not understand what you're saying. I'm going to need you to use different words, maybe small ones, but there you go.
Let me ask you this, Lee, because, from your experience, academics are doing great work and they, I'm going to assume they love, the stuff that they're researching. What I'm not convinced of is that they care that anybody does anything with that research, that their goal is to do the research. They've done the research. I'm a brilliant person, but they don't have a lot of thoughts. Like their next thought is not, now I need to get this into the industry. They've done their work. They're happy with it. What's my next grant?
I think there's a validity to that, because for a pure academic, pure researcher who's doing research for the love of the research, as long as the money keeps coming, just think about research in general. There have been some things that turned out horribly, horribly wrong when out in the world, whether it's medical or scientific, Oppenheimer, I have become destroyer of worlds. There are things that people academically go, that's fascinating, I want to know. But they don't think about what what somebody can do with that. And if you've ever seen the movie Real Genius, one of my favorite movies, and he's given a task, he goes to do it, and he does it. And somebody goes, well, what would you do with that? And they're like, well, that's not our problem. The engineers can figure that out. And somebody goes, but this thing could do this thing that's really bad. And then all of a sudden, boom, the light bulb goes off. Maybe the pure science isn't as pure. And it's really an interesting moment in an otherwise comedic film. But yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of people out there, I'm sure, that are doing it just because they love the research and it's fascinating without thinking about the ramifications. But the flip side of that is when somebody gives you money to do research, they have a reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're giving you that money, because they want an answer, and they have an idea of what they're going to do with that information. And and ethically, we need to think about that. It may be fascinating. There's some really fascinating things that could have really terrible results. Ethically, we need to think about where is all, sometimes the difference between a good reason and the right reason.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the destroyer of ski hills, Linda Ann.
Oh man, last season it destroyed me. So one of the things that for me is with regard to research is sometimes I'm looking for a solution, or sometimes I'm just looking for new information. I want to see what's the latest and greatest out there. And oftentimes I come away with not a lot, because we're dealing with people and human behavior. And what happens is we change some of the conditions, like in the workplace and things like that, but they cause similar problems. Even though the conditions are a little different, they cause similar problems. And so we're looking for, I'm not seeing a lot of new earth-shaking information. And I'd love for somebody to challenge me on that and go, oh no, you're not looking in the right place. Because often I'm like, so what's new? What's next? And how can I help somebody move forward with that? And I'm not seeing it. It all boils down to kind of the same thing in my mind. So somebody challenge me on that.
All right, there's the challenge. Jason, let's go to you.
I'm not going to challenge that. Sorry. Well, I'm curious on two things, and I'm learning. My background is on the investigation side and stuff. But the first question that I kind of have is IO, when they're internal, extended beyond their job description, I guess you would say, where they don't have the capabilities of being in the research like they should be on the practitioner side, and then translating, that research into the applied side. And then the other part that I have is I would like to think that we do research for a reason, right? Like with my research, I'm very passionate about my research, and I can't wait to get my research done and understand what my research is, so I can go to conferences and communicate and have Zooms and have quality conversations with people. So there may be a disconnect as far as, are academics even taught how to get into the community and communicate their research to practitioners? So that may be one of those things that could be addressed later on. I know SIOP has their new standards that are out for us to vote on as far as education standards and stuff, and maybe that's something that's coming down the pipe. I'm not sure, but my question is, is it just, are IO psychologists just overextended within the workplace as far as practitioners?
That's a great question for you, Jeremy.
Overextended in terms of, sorry, I was looking to try to find a journal that has only practitioner stories, so I was a little sidetracked. Overextended in terms of the amount of IOs in the field versus jobs? No.
Sorry.
Is that what the question was?
Oh, no, sir. I'm sorry. No, overextended as far as, we're hired to do a job. They go out there, they're practitioners, but due to their position, the responsibilities, whatever the contract is, or, if they're internal, whatever their job description is, which is subject to change, that they're actually overextended as far as tasks, where they're starting to bleed over into a little bit too much HR or whatever it may be. I'm not sure, where they're not able to get into the literature to then understand the literature, to translate the literature, because we understand that literature is very focused, right? I mean, it's bounded, and we understand how to translate literature that's coming in from overseas, and what that may look like for organizations that we're working for. But if we can't get into the literature because we're overextended, then that it kind of makes sense. And then how would we even advocate for that, right? But I'm not even sure if that's a thing. That was my question. Is that I think?
Yeah, I think any industry, you're going to have these people that are just super overextended and aren't going to have time, and then they're going to make silly mistakes, like not, for example, going and finding out what evidence says is best practices. I think you're going to have that no matter what. And my gosh, are there some really tight deadlines? I mean, I just had 2 meetings about how tight these deadlines are for a project that we're working on that's coming up, just to try to figure out how do we get this done within the organization's timeline, with in terms of data collection and all this other stuff with executive reports. And so there are some really tight timelines, but that's where it's whether you're talking to someone in construction or the food business or architecture and engineering, time management is a very elusive type of thing. And that's where it's just how many of us are making it a priority to go and read through. I remember back in grad school, one of the first things I would look at an article, I would jump straight to the conclusion section or the discussion session just to get the meat of it, because I wanted those bullet points. And then you can decide if the rest is worth reading. So some of it also has to do with, being able to effectively move through that research. But right now, and I'm sure like plenty of you probably have some good tips where AI can go through articles. I haven't done that, but I know there's like these AI things out there that can go through. I'm still worried of that because I'll look at the AI summary and then I'll want to go find it anyway. So I'll just kind of do double the time just to make sure the AI isn't wrong. But back to using, because how many times, Tom, have we said the word roadmap in terms of using the articles or the research? Because we've found just some bangers that have been like, okay, organization X, if you're struggling with this, wow, look, this one particular article with all this research is an exact roadmap that can give you an idea based on evidence of how to move through this. So it's not, I definitely don't, because we're all the practitioner side here. I don't want us to, or academic, they probably don't care anyway. But I don't want to come across as ungrateful. Like they're probably over there listening to us and like, well, fine, we're not going to conduct any research. What are you going to do now? So, but we absolutely, we need it. And I wonder if the collaboration will point to more relevant research, with more being able to find what's relevant. Kind of what Lee said earlier in terms of the donors for these studies. What's getting studied might not be what the current demand is out there. So I think there's definitely value in that. I also think there's value in really getting to the base of things. If you're a practitioner in this field, you somehow you love research. We've got this connection with it. We spent so much time in it, whether heartache or not, sticking our nose in these thousands of journals and doing all these tedious assignments. But there comes a part where it's just part of your DNA, and you do get excited about it, and you like this. So part of it is just falling back in love with this thing that we did for so long, and quite frankly, we just good at by nature. And I think on the academic side, academics have this innate sense of, I mean, you want to talk about imposter syndrome. Academics have a lot of imposter syndrome because they get that, well, you can teach it and you can understand it, but how come you're not practicing and applying it? So there are a lot of academics out there that long to be seen as someone who could also be a consultant, who long to be seen as someone who, all right, it's not, I don't just sit here and theorize and conduct the research. If I were thrown into an organization right now, I'd be good enough. So we both have a longing to take that rubber band stretch and both come back to the center and quite frankly, just have a nice big group hug. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And Christine, let's go to you next. We haven't heard from you today. And then Nick, we'll come back to you. Oh, Christine, you're on. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. I was just saying that I kept raising my hand and taking it down because people were like answering the things that I was thinking. So here's a couple of things. The first is I too am not an academic. Never really had the intent to be an academic. I always wanted to be in the corporate business world. And however, I am actually an adjunct professor at the university or at Vanguard University for their IO program. And the reason why I was even poached to teach there was simply because of my practical experience, because I actually am a practitioner and I'm not a researcher. And the intent for that was I have the ability to do the research as an adjunct professor, right? And provide that methodology, the theory, all of the things to my students whilst mirroring it with my practical experience and my real world experience. And so going back to the conversation about we have an opportunity to kind of reach out to universities, I think universities are starting to recognize the need for the next generation of IO psychologists to actually understand how to apply their methodologies and the theories that they are studying. And they're looking for practitioners to teach that next generation. And so there's that piece. Then there's then my thoughts around some of the other things that we were talking about is some of us are just really talented at research and that's what we should be doing. And some of us are really talented at practice and that's what we should be doing. And it doesn't mean that never the two should meet. It just means we recognize the talent that exists in both parties. And I believe we need to leverage them. And to Dr. Jeremy's point earlier, that's kind of the come together in one big hug situation. Look, I recognize I'm not a good researcher. I maybe don't have the patience or the funding or all of the things, but I recognize its value in what I teach my students. And so the same is true in my mind for research, right? They recognize the importance for practitioners to execute. To Linda Ann's question, where is the research that's sharing about the next level? I don't have an answer, but I'd love to hear when people do have an answer to that, because I don't think I've actually found it. Because a lot of my research and methodology that I leverage for my students is all old, to your point. Even though I do try to leverage kind of the artificial intelligence component for IO, because I do feel like the future of IO is leveraging artificial intelligence and the way we collect data on our organizations that's already existing. We have this great opportunity to leverage it for future. And that's a little bit of the research meets practice, right? We're already collecting all of this data and artificial intelligence can spit out the information for us. And then we as practitioners can apply it in very unique and different ways for our organization. So thank you, Tom.
Love having you here. And you brought new stuff. Way to go. It sounds like you're in that gap that we talk about. And I love the fact that you're actually connecting with those academics. Because if I was an academic and someone came to me and said, I want to take your research and take it to the world, I'd be pretty hyped about that. So is one possible solution is for IO psychologists who are practical to not just access the research, but actually talk to the researchers and see if there's some sort of collaboration there.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like that's definitely on, especially someone like me, right? As an adjunct professor, it's totally on me to reach out to those researchers and say, hey, how can we collaborate and take this research kind of to the next level and to the world? Now that you've done the research, how do we apply it? And let's talk about how we do that.
Yeah. Of course, some academics like to hide under rocks, but you might be able to find them there.
That's right. That's right.
Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, it's exciting because we talk about, big changes coming and the potential. AI is not going to fix, a broken system on its own, but it may make that research more accessible or to be able to filter through faster to get the refresher. There's a very big chance that it's going to transform the way that people are doing research, and they're doing research about the impact that it's having already. And I think that it's got potential, and we've got to find the right ways to use it while maintaining academic standards. I sat in a session at SciOp this last year, and it was an academic kind of raging against ad science in the workplace. And they're like, it all makes sense. I've lined it out. This is peer reviewed, and it's this and it's that. And I kind of challenged him. I said, well, maybe for somebody, the first time they really understood, personality constructs was being introduced to something like the Myers-Briggs. And so that emotional connection to that construct is now tied to what is a flawed tool at some times. And so just because, it's clear and it's lined out and research is very specific of we did this and then this and then this, and this is what we found. Some of those steps, when you get it outside of the sterilized research, there's an emotional component to people and how they understand it. And I think that's, one of the components of the gap. But for him to kind of have that light bulb of go, oh, what I put in the research and what I intended, when it got out into the wider world, it became a rogue construct, and it wasn't the same meaning. It wasn't the same intent. And I'm no longer in control of the concept or anything like that.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Heather, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. So Nick, when you were talking about the Myers-Briggs, it's a little off topic, but I thought of this quote that I saw the other day, and it said, every time an organization uses Myers-Briggs, a psychologist loses their wings, which is my favorite thing, because I teach about how this assessment, that the MBTI is not entirely reliable and valid, but that quote just summed it up for me. It was the best. But actually, I'm on here to talk about, so I found a lot of things in the comments, one of which was mine, which was, it would be so cool to have a database where we had all this research kind of categorized and people could give their results and did it work? Did it not work? What happened? And then going down the comments, I think it was Linda Ann. I'm looking. Oh, no. First, it was Dr. Michelle Powell, who said, perhaps we can create an annotations or Cliff Notes type app, which I love that idea. And fun fact, ChatGPT-5 just, what is the word for it? Not unleashed, but it's now available and you can create apps with it. So that might be something to look into. But I like the idea. I'm on Reddit a lot, and they have this TLDR, it's too long, didn't read thing, where if people have a lot of long posts, it's just this nice little snippet at the bottom. It gives the key takeaways, and we can do that with research, just give the valuable stuff, and that would be so cool. And people can write their own things inside of it. And then Linda Ann said Blinkist. I love Blinkist. I don't know if you guys have that app. It is so cool to just get little snapshots of textbooks or books in general. So I actually will use Blinkist for books that I want to read and kind of get that TLDR until I can read it. And so these are all really great ideas I think we could utilize.
I love those ideas, and I know Jeremy was working on an IA bot a year or so ago. I think he started trying to create one that was an IO psychologist. So we might get an update for him. But first, Rashid, let's go to you. Oh, we can't hear you, Rashid. Are you muted? You're muted now there. Try that. No, we still can't hear you. You might just check your mic settings and come back. But while you're doing that, Jeremy, you were working with a bot about a year ago and starting to do some training, I think. Do you want to give us an update?
So what that was, it's not, I don't think it's what you're thinking. It's we created a custom GPT. It's an IO career coach for IO psychologists. Custom GPT. So people that are in the IO Career Accelerator course that we have can use that as a coach. And we're actually, Heather and I were talking a couple of days ago about just making that available to all of our members. So we'll probably just send an email out and give everyone that as well, because it's pretty cool. We've had some good feedback on it.
All right. Rashid, just say hello when you think you got your mic going. Some of the ideas, because we've talked a lot about the issues, but we've also, especially with Heather and I think it was Nick, we're coming up with some actually really good ideas. So anything that you've been writing down going, ooh, we need to do that?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I just took my piece of note paper out and I put it over here, and then the fan blew it behind me. So, because we were getting close to end, I needed to get it out of the way. But as far as the ideas, I really like that idea of a publication. I just went and I tried to find really quick, is there anything? But I like the whole concept of making it more digestible results. And why isn't there? And that's what I was looking for. Why isn't there a journal out there that is just specifically stories of, why isn't there a practitioner journal? So I think there's some kind of combination between the app that Michelle was saying, between the Blinkist and the alphabet letter thing that Dr. Heather was saying, the TDLR, RQ, STY thing. I think there's something out there in terms of getting this information, the dissemination of this information, so that there's just more of just interest in this organic, this energy, that we can find stuff we want, the things that are practical to be researched are researched by academics, and there we go.
Is there not a role developing, especially for those IO psychologists who might just be graduating university, who are going to be a lot more tech savvy than me? Are they candidates who may be ideally suited to work with app developers and technology people to help create some of these things? And why can't I have an IO psychologist who's a robot?
You will soon. But to what you were saying about the students, one of the articles, I actually have a snippet. One way to bridge this divide is engage students who are often also practitioners can enhance this knowledge transfer and collaboration. And Tom, like you're saying, now with all the tech, you're going to have students who are more tech savvy the more and more we get into this tech world. So yeah, I think the student aspect, because they're also hungry too. They can incorporate it. I mean, that kind of thing can be incorporated into their studies, into the degree program, into, who knows. But the students are the ones that have a nicely fresh perspective, are tech savvy, and some's going to happen. 5 years from now, we'll be talking about a lot of different stuff. Maybe we'll have a revisit.
Well, I can't wait for the day when we've got two Jeremys on screen, the real one and the robot one, and just see if they agree with things. So it also does sound like we've not only got that gap between research and practical application, but there's also a bit of a gap between taking that knowledge and information and making it relevant to the client. So is there a way that we can, bridge both of those gaps, or should we look at them as independent?
They're not independent. And I think somebody, maybe it was Christine, Dr. Patty Delgado's, the Bridgeify group, in terms of bridging that gap, I'll give them a plug. It's the Bridgeify group. Dr. Patricia Delgado, anyone can look that up. But their whole thing is research translation, like translating the research into business applications, for example, and doing that storytelling with the data. So there's definitely a need. Luckily, there's Patty and her group are filling that need.
And she used to be a regular, but then she got busy.
Yeah, there's that much of a need, Tom.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for that. And we are just out of time. IO Psychology Month, we are celebrating it. How are we going to celebrate next week?
So next week for the podcast, Tom, we are going somewhere we shouldn't dare to go.
Yay!
Just don't know where that is yet. Right now, it's just open discussion, no topic finalized yet.
So to find the conclusion for this mystery, tune in next week. And with that, anything else going on in the IO or the CBALC world? I see Lee is continually doing his mixers. How are the early stagers going? The career development?
Hold on. Actually, there's some people here that are on there. We just had a coaching meeting yesterday for the people in the IO Career Accelerator course. And the decision was to move to a working session, which was a good idea, so that people can set aside a time. It's every other Friday up until right before Thanksgiving, where they can actually get together and work through the course together, have that support group. So good idea. So that's a little bit of a development there. And then the code is 30% off the course for August. It's aware 30, or for an extra 2%, Tom. To get 32% off the course, the code is aware 32.
Save those percents for rainy days.
Big time.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. And with that, I think it's time to wrap. So if you want to count us out, we'll see everyone back here in 1 week's time.
Beautiful job, everyone. As always, counting out in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.